Gentlemen, congrats on the film today. I am joined by JT Mollner, I think I'm saying that correctly, and Giovanni Ribisi, the cinematographer.
Ribisi.
Ribisi of Strange Darling, which hits theaters on Friday, August 23rd. This is one of the most unexpected, twisty films I've seen in some time, which I think, in a way, being surprised is actually the point of storytelling, right? But I was curious about because of my line of work and my love of film, I rarely go into things without being prepared for what I'm going to see, seeing a trailer, reading about it, so on and so forth. I went into this as completely blind as I could. And I'm pretty sure it says that on the poster, like going blind. So I'm curious about the
Mike
challenges.
Flanagan
Or
said that. Yeah.
what?
Mike Flanagan said, please go in blind. And they use that quote in the trailer, and people make a lot of jokes about that.
There you
But
go.
I think it
So
helped.
it is, in theory, great, but I'm curious about the calculation and construction of a film making and marketing something which has a feature of going in as blind as you can. How does that affect the process of creating it and selling it?
Um, I mean, my answer is, and apologies for the lack of voice. I did not smoke a carton of cigarettes before this interview. I just have been talking for 2 days, and it's
I
gone.
get the gig. No worries.
But yeah, so please bear with me. But no, the for me, it's important as you know, as a writer and a director, to not think about those things at all when I'm writing. Um, because I always say, like, I'm one of the architects, I'm not the realtor, you know. Like, it's not my job to sell things. I'm not an expert at it. I'm not, that's not what I do, you know. So what we do is create something that is surprising and hopefully subversive and interesting, and then you hand it over and say, is there a way to do this, you know? And maybe I should think about that stuff more often, because my first movie I made was a Western, and it wasn't until after we finished making it everybody explained to me that Westerns were like impossible to sell and on the market. So it's, maybe I should think about those things, but I usually don't. And so this was interesting because it was important that the surprises that happen, the whole film doesn't rely on the surprises. It was important to me that they sort of unfold before the midpoint, and then we're able to watch the truth of this film, or like live with the truth of these characters and their situations for a good portion of the movie, instead of going down the, I revere him, but the Rod Serling route, or the, early M. Night Shyamalan route, where like there's such an amazing twist at the end that's the only thing you remember of, or that's like the main thing. And so those movies have been done so well. Hitchcock's done it. I didn't want to attempt that. We just wanted to make sure it was surprising along the way. And so yeah, everybody was a little nervous. All the people who liked the movie and made offers for the movie were a little bit nervous about how to market it, because they were afraid if I wanted them to just straight up, like, not give away anything, and they were afraid that our audience wouldn't come to see the movie if that were the case. So Magenta Light, Bob Yari, Amanda Laurent, they took the movie, and they really have done a great job, in my opinion. I really love the trailers that David Gray Edwards, head of marketing, and Marisa, PR, have developed, and the trailers are great. I like the key art, and I think they've done a really good job of towing the line, and a much better job than I could have done.
To the point of the way that this film presents itself, and this is for both of you, but Gio, mainly you. I'm curious about the decision to let the audience know that they're watching a 35 millimeter shot film up front. Is that made with the assumption that the film's first audience is going to be cinephiles who understand that, and then the film will find its legs through word of mouth? Why not just leave someone wondering, man, why the hell does this look so good?
Oh, well, that's really nice of you to say thank you. I think that, well, JT and I met in the first time and bonded over film, actually through the president at the time, the president of Kodak, Steve Bellamy. And by the way, every time we say that, somebody has to take a drink. Steve Bellamy.
It's Steve Bellamy.
Steve Bellamy. Yeah, there you go. And
7:30 here, so don't worry.
yeah, oh, good. So we there was really no choice, no other choice for us. It's because it's, it's so important for the fabric of this film, but also it's just the process of making a movie. It's just it's different from shooting something that's on the digital formats. To that, we had so much support that that JT felt that it was important to put that at the front. I had a reservation, but now in retrospect, as I've done so many times during the process, JT was right, because it's not just for cinephiles. It's really for a broader audience to say, look at this, because this is not a movie that was designed for convenience of pushing a button on an electric machine that makes a bunch of files. We worked for this, and it was blood, sweat, and tears, truly. And we didn't want to have that be easy. And I think that you can see that desperation in the film, in the characters, in the actors' performances, in the editing. It's just electric. It's just electric.
I'm curious how the relationship between being a producer and the DP of a 35 film works, though. Does it increase the pressure on you because there's less leeway and less room for?
He wasn't
How
designed
do
to.
those parts of your brain sort of coincide?
Well, yeah, I don't know. I think that, okay, so film has been around for 150 years. I mean, this is the dilemma for me, that I go, it wasn't really, I mean, it was always hard. Any movie is a miracle, but we didn't have a comparison before. It's just what you did, and it was just like what you did. You shot on film, right? And now suddenly digital's out, and it's like shooting film is the hardest thing. It's not. And this is one of the things that I think is important for people to realize when they are looking at, or when they want to make a movie on celluloid, is that it is possible. There's so many misconceptions that they don't even ask the question anymore. And so I think that was that. I think to that, a lot of people it's surprising for people when they learn how much the budget was, and still
Which was, because I have no idea.
I don't know if I'm allowed to say anything.
Oh, okay. Sure. Um,
It was low. It was low.
to that point, does the film format influence the color palette that you used? And I asked that because I want to just kind of give you guys the floor to talk about the color red and why it was used so much, why you wanted it to have such a grip on this film, and if there were any sort of unexpected benefits to it or challenges to it.
Well, so one of the things for me, and this is my opinion, but I think there's also some verity in it, is that there's a wider dynamic range in saturation that's possible with film than there is for digital. If not, it's just, it leans in a certain way that is more appealing to my senses when you really saturate colors, and when you light something like that, like light a subject like that. I think that, as JT has said so eloquently, in reference to other movies, that we really wanted to weaponize color in this. And I think that it was just this unapologetic rattling the cage, reaching for something that was just different from these sort of softer pastel tertiary colors that you see so often, that start to feel slick and just sort of run of the mill. And so I think it was all of that. It was infusing the movie with that visual language, on top of the elegant writing and these characters that were so desperate. Yeah, that's me reaching for an answer.
You know that the good ones are the ones where you're not pre-programmed and you've got to reach to think about it.
Right.
JT, I'm curious. So I was born in 1993. Pulp Fiction is formative in my life. My mom probably showed that to me way before she should have seen that. And of course, the hallmark of that film, it's become increasingly not normal, but used as the years have gone on, the non-linear storytelling. I'm curious, at what stage is that choice made? Is it in the script? Do you make that choice when you take on the project? And then on top of that, do you cut together the film in sequential order to also see how that plays?
No, no. I know it's the good question. It's weird. I remember seeing um Goodfellas when I was too young to watch it, probably.
That
Like,
those are my top two. I use those two films as the films that shaped my
Yeah.
whole worldview, and I saw them way too young.
yeah, and you know, I saw Goodfellas on my brother's house. He was 15 years older than me. He lived in North Hollywood. I was visiting from Vegas, and he had HBO. We didn't have HBO at home, and there was Goodfellas, and I got to watch Goodfellas, and my parents wouldn't have let me watch it. I wasn't quite at the age where they were wanting to me to, but I was almost there. But I was watching Goodfellas, and it just opened my mind. You know, there's so many other films that was like a gateway movie for me, but there's so many other films from decades earlier now that have influenced me and that I've learned from. But Goodfellas was like the first time I really watched a movie and remember thinking, wow, this is the power of like, you can do this stuff. It's crazy. And I venture to say that Goodfellas probably has a lot to do with Pulp Fiction being the way it is too, you know, because I think it came out a couple years earlier. But Pulp Fiction's another movie that did that to people. It was just fresh and it was different. And so, but not in, he doesn't employ it in the same way, but even Goodfellas was in some ways non-linear. You know, he'll open up in the middle of the movie, and then it goes back to the beginning of the movie. And I just, ever since then, I don't seek out a non-linear story. But my brain is open. My mind is very open. My heart is open when I'm coming up with things. And sometimes it just is like, oh, this needs to be first because it's going to draw the audience in. This is what I want to introduce the movie with. And then maybe we'll go back and maybe we'll do this. So I think in those terms frequently, but it did not set out to make a nonlinear movie. It came to me in this order. And so
That's
when I
fascinating.
when I finished conceiving of the story, I was really surprised myself. Like it came to me in exactly that order. And so when I wrote it, I knew it had to take place in that had to be the chronology, because that's why the movie's compelling. I think if you think it's compelling, that's why it's compelling, because
I
uh,
I would not have waited around if I didn't think it was compelling.
thank
But
you.
so
No, it's just the sequencing needed to stay that way, and I wasn't interested in putting it in order because I could predict how it would go, and but there were some people who wanted to put it in order, and they asked me very nicely if they could, and they went and did it,
the
and
suits,
we
those
watched
meddling suits.
How'd you know?
but
Was it, wasn't it?
to their credit, once they put it in order, I said, listen, I do not like this. Can we test my version? And we tested my version. It went well. And then in the end, you know, Bill Block and Miramax gave me final cut on the movie. And so
Awesome.
we were able to keep it that way. But and then Bob Yari, Magenta Light, they bought it, and everything's been great since. But
Well, and
um,
then just real quick to build on that, where does the decision to tell you what chapter it is come from? Because Tarantino did it in parts, but I think the parts were in sequential order, whereas you start with chapter 6 or chapter 4 and you tell us where we are. What's the thinking behind that?
well, I'm essentially a failed novelist. Like I wanted to be a novelist growing up, and I
Shoot
always loved.
for the books, and if you miss, you'll land
Yeah,
amongst the films.
no, no, I love. There's books and movies are everything to me. So, but there was a time when I really wanted to be a novel, and I read voraciously, and I love books, and I love this idea of chapters. And so, when I'm thinking about presenting something on the screen, a lot of times it's in the terminology of books, and so it felt interesting to for chapter 3. I think just the announcement. Um, Later on, they don't necessarily have the same impact, but putting those chapter breaks in, the fact that chapter 3 comes first, I think it just tells the audience. It's kind of like once again, the opening of Goodfellas. You know, he opens the trunk and starts stabbing a guy with a butcher knife in the back of a trunk, and that's the opening of the movie. And then it goes back to, ever since I can remember, I always wanted to be a gangster. And so from that moment on in that movie, you're on edge. You know that anything can happen at any time, and it's almost, it creates a tension that's visceral. And so when we start in chapter 3, I think right off the bat, and a hero of ours watched the movie the other day and said that the minute he saw chapter 3, he knew that we were up to something, and it made him interested. And so
It's
I think
Stephen King, because I saw him just tweet about it.
it's crazy.
Wasn't it?
Crazy.
Didn't Godard say that a story has a beginning and a middle and an end, but not necessarily in that order, or something to that effect? And I think that, yeah, I think if you even look at dare I say, a masterpiece like Pulp Fiction, it's really not about doing math as much as it is a sequence of the way a person might experience the hero's journey. And what I think was so incredible about Pulp Fiction, obviously a lot of people remember the non-sequential factor, or structure, I should say. But it's also like when I watched Pulp Fiction for the first time, and also Goodfellas, of course, I was like, oh wow, gangsters actually,
Eat
talk
dinner.
about
Yeah.
Yeah.
Eat
eat dinner, and
sandwiches.
they talk about the Royale,
Yeah.
the quarter pounder, and all that, and they have conversations about the ethics of giving a foot massage, on leading up to what they're about to do to their work. And I'd never really seen anything like that, unless it was like an absurd or ridiculous comedy or something to that effect, So that was to me an amazing thing. It was an emotional experience for an audience to go through those various nonlinear uh, parts of the film.
This might sound crazy, but with Pulp Fiction, when I think there were time when we put this movie together and somebody read the script or saw a first cut and was like, "Oh, non-sequential like Pulp Fiction, how much of it?" Actually, I forget that Pulp Fiction was out of sequence, because the
Exactly.
movie, and of course, when you bring it up, then I remember. But that's not what I remember about the movie. I remember that about, Memento. It's like a character in the movie. Pulp Fiction, it seems like the movie had to kind of be told in that way,
The
and so that's why it
world.
works. Yeah.
Yeah, it was characters, it was their lives, it was the relationship, it was the rhetoric, it was the dialogue. That was the other thing, is like a lot of people forget about how what Pulp Fiction meant when we first experienced that and watched it, and like, it was the dialogue that was just so incredible. Like it was truly nothing, like nothing we had ever seen, yeah.
And
All right.
with the last thing I want to tell you about, just really quick, is, 21 Grams is a movie that I remember watching that film, and I was blown. It's one of my favorite films by him, and it was this movie was totally out of sequence, didn't announce where anything was happening, no chapter breaks, no nothing. And I remember having this sense halfway through 21 Grams of being um, uh, mystified but never confused. Like it was weird. I knew it was going to fall into place. Like I knew, so I just went along for the ride, and I know it didn't work for everybody like that, but that influenced me highly. It was very, very impactful film.
I forget where I heard it, but they said that the best sort of twists and turns are the ones that are wholly unexpected, yet you should have seen it coming.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like your film is full of those. I've got to start to wind down here. So I've got so much shit that I wanted to ask, and we just went on and on. My fault. So I got to pick one. Okay, adding the element of the supernatural into this film. Spoiler warning, spoiler warning, spoiler warning. It didn't necessarily need it, so I'm curious how that part of the story came to be and what you think it added. And beyond that, what's behind the choice to not show what she's seeing except for that quick frame right at the end?
Um, so all I'll say about that is that there was a goal in mind for these characters to create a version of a killer who's not a sociopath, right? Like so, who even though
That's sorry to people.
even though the killer is very damaged, and serial killers, no matter what, what the motivation is, obviously, or there's a mental illness happening. sociopathy is not the thing. Like this serial kill. I wanted to depict a serial killer who had some humanity and regret and compulsion to do this, but didn't, and highly influenced by movies like the original Let the Right One In, which, watching a vampire feast and then cry afterwards or feel, but I just remember being so moved by that. And so that was that function, what you're talking about, just I think helped support that a little bit. And yeah, and that was just that. But we wanted to keep it very grounded.
Is that frame at the end in the script? Is that a note?
The visions were in the script.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean,
yeah.
Okay.
this
Go.
is something we want people to experience.
Yeah.
Of course. Well, that's why I yelled. Spoiler warning. Spoiler warning. If you are watching this, please go out and watch Strange Dark. Sorry, the word
frame?
strange.
What are you talking about?
Huh?
What frame? What are you talking about?
No,
to be clear, that's why I saved that for the way end. I'm on the same team as you guys.
Yeah, the execution was not scripted of that, but it was the idea was there.
All right, gentlemen, congrats. Awesome
Thank
film.
you, Eric.
Can't wait to see what you guys both have next behind the camera.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.